In the heart of Africa, nestled among rolling hills and dense forests, lay the peaceful village of Ngwena. This small yet thriving community was known for its harmony, beautiful landscapes, and strong sense of tradition. The people of Ngwena lived simple, contented lives, working together to maintain their homes and land. Among the villagers was Zena, a strikingly beautiful woman, admired for her ambition and charm. She was married to Taye, a hard-working man who loved her deeply. Their life together seemed perfect. Taye worked the land, ensuring they lived comfortably, while Zena spent her days managing their home and socializing with the other women in the village. They had no children yet, but they were content in their peaceful little world. However, Zena's life took an unexpected turn when Taye's mother, Amina, came to live with them. Amina had once been a respected elder, wise and strong, her presence a symbol of dignity in the village. But time had changed her. Now Amina was frail and dependent, no longer able to care for herself in the way she once had. Her once sharp mind had begun to dull, and her body was weak from age. She had nowhere else to go, and Taye, being the dutiful son, invited her to live with them, thinking it was the right thing to do. Zena, however, was not pleased. She had always envisioned a life of her own, free from the responsibilities of caring for an elderly woman. At first, she tried to hide her growing frustration, but it was clear that Amina's presence was starting to weigh heavily on her. As the days passed, Zena's resentment grew, and the perfect life she had imagined began to slip away. When Amina arrived at Zena and Taye's home, it didn't take long for Zena to feel her resentment grow. At first, Zena tried to be polite and welcoming, but it was hard for her to hide how much she was bothered by her mother-in-law's presence. Amina was slow, forgetful, and in need of constant care. Simple tasks, like making tea or walking to the garden, became difficult for her. She needed Zena to help her with everything, and this put an unexpected burden on Zena, who wasn't used to caring for anyone other than herself and Taye. Every day, Zena had to remind Amina of things, help her get dressed, and even feed her at times. It felt like Zena's freedom was slipping away. Taye, however, was steadfast in his belief that they had to take care of Amina. In their culture, it was the son's duty to care for his mother, especially in her old age. Taye kept reminding Zena that it was a matter of respect and tradition, and though Zena understood this, she couldn't help but feel trapped. Her patience began to wear thin as she found herself doing more and more for Amina, all while managing her home and trying to keep up with her own ambitions. Zena couldn't shake the feeling that her life was now ruled by Amina's needs. Secretly, Zena began to dream of a life without Amina in it. She imagined how much easier things would be if her mother-in-law wasn't there, constantly needing attention. Zena fantasized about having her home back to herself, with no one to take up her time and energy. Every time she helped Amina, Zena's frustration grew. She resented how much of her life was being consumed by someone else's dependence. As the days went on, Zena started to feel suffocated by the extra responsibility and longed for a way to break free. As time went on, Zena's frustration with Amina continued to grow, and she found herself seeking a way out of the situation. She started complaining to Taye more and more, talking about how difficult life had become with Amina in the house. Zena exaggerated Amina's helplessness, painting her as completely incapable of doing even the simplest things for herself. She would tell Taye how Amina was slowing everything down, how she took forever to do anything, needed constant attention, and was becoming a burden on the household. Zena's words were carefully chosen, designed to make Taye see Amina as nothing more than a nuisance. At first, Taye tried to defend his mother, reminding Zena that Amina had always been strong and that it was their duty to care for her now. But Zena wasn't about to give up so easily. She became more persuasive, telling Taye that it wasn't good for Amina to live with them in this condition, that it would be better for everyone if she was in a place where she could receive better care. Zena argued that they could find somewhere safe for Amina to stay, a place where she could be looked after by professionals. She made it sound like a kind and selfless decision, suggesting it would relieve both of them from the constant strain of taking care of her. Taye, torn between his love for his wife and his sense of duty to his mother, began to feel conflicted. He didn't want to upset Zena, but he also didn't want to go against the values he had been raised with. Deep down, he knew it was wrong to send his mother away, but Zena's convincing words wore him down. He reluctantly agreed, telling Zena that he would make the arrangements for Amina to leave. He felt a pang of guilt in his heart, knowing he wasn't honoring his mother as he should, but he convinced himself that this was for the best. The weight of his decision, though, would soon prove to be heavier than he expected. One day, Zena's frustration reached its peak. She couldn't take it any longer. The constant care, The burden of looking after Amina was too much for her to handle. She pushed Taye one last time, urging him to make the decision to send Amina away. Zena insisted that it was the only way for them to find peace and live the life they deserved. Reluctantly, Taye gave in. He knew deep down that it was wrong, but he also felt the weight of Zena's constant pressure. It was time to make a choice, and his love for Zena pushed him to act. The next morning, Zena and Taye escorted Amina to the edge of the village, where the dirt road faded into the dense forest. Amina, who was already frail and confused, didn't understand why she was being treated this way. She tried to hold on to Taye, asking him why they were leaving her alone, but Taye couldn't bring himself to explain. Zena, with a coldness that shocked even her, told Amina that it was time for her to leave. She was no longer welcome in their home, no longer needed. Amina, heartbroken and devastated, could barely comprehend what was happening. She had spent her life raising her son, only to be cast aside in her old age. Tears welled up in Amina's tired eyes as she turned away, shuffling slowly down the path. The village that had once been her home now felt like a distant memory. With no place to go, Amina wandered into the forest, the shadows of the trees enveloping her. She was all alone, helpless and fragile. The forest seemed endless, and the weight of her loneliness pressed down on her like a heavy stone. Amina had nowhere to turn, no one to care for her. All she had now were her memories of the family she once thought would take care of her in her old age. Amina, though weak and heartbroken, wasn't ready to give up just yet. As she wandered through the dense forest, lost and unsure of where to go, she stumbled upon a small, hidden hut. Inside lived Nia, a kind and quiet healer who had recently arrived in the village. Nia had an air of mystery about her, and there were whispers that she had a past full of secrets. But to Amina, Nia was a blessing. The healer took one look at Amina, her fragile state, and knew she could not leave her to perish alone in the forest. Nia welcomed Amina into her humble home and began to teach her the ways of survival. With gentle hands, she showed Amina how to gather herbs and prepare healing remedies from the plants that grew around them. The forest, once a place of fear and uncertainty for Amina, became her new refuge, a place where she learned to adapt and survive. Nia shared her knowledge, teaching Amina not only how to heal, but also how to care for herself in a way she had never known before. Amina, though old and worn, began to regain some of her strength, both in body and spirit. She was amazed at how much she was able to learn from Nia, a woman who seemed to know everything about the natural world. As they spent more time together, Nia learned more about Amina's past, and soon the truth began to unfold. Amina, in her younger years, had once been a powerful and respected woman in the village. She wasn't just Taye's mother. She had held a fortune that could change the fate of anyone who knew about it. Amina had kept this fortune a secret, hidden from everyone, including her own son. It was a fortune that could provide for an entire village, a treasure buried away in a hidden location. The more Nia learned about Amina's past, the more she realized that Amina's true power was not just in her ability to heal, but in the wealth and knowledge she had hidden away, a secret that could turn everything around for Amina, and perhaps even for Taye. With Amina gone, Zena and Taye's life seemed to take a turn for the better. Zena's ambition flourished, and without the constant burden of caring for her mother-in-law, she had more time and energy to focus on herself. She became increasingly involved in the village, using her charm and determination to gain influence among the people. She quickly established herself as an important figure in Ngwena, often organizing community events, helping to settle disputes, and building connections with the most powerful families in the village. Her reputation grew, and soon everyone knew who Zena was. She became the woman everyone looked to for advice, and her success seemed endless. Meanwhile, Taye couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at him. Deep inside, he regretted sending his mother away. He often thought of her in the quiet moments, wondering where she was and how she was surviving in the forest. His conscience weighed heavily on him, and the memory of Amina's sad eyes as she walked away from their home haunted him. He knew that he had failed her as a son, but despite his guilt, Taye found himself swept up in Zena's success and charm. Her growing influence made her even more captivating to him, and he found himself supporting her in everything she did. He pushed his feelings of guilt aside, convincing himself that it was too late to change what had already been done. The life they were building together seemed too important to question now. As the years passed, Zena's heart began to harden. She had become so absorbed in her own success that she no longer felt any sympathy for Amina. The woman who had once been her mother-in-law, the frail and helpless figure she had resented, now seemed like a distant memory. Zena no longer cared about the woman she had sent away. To her, Amina was just a burden from her past, someone who no longer mattered. Zena's ambition had pushed her to the top, and her focus on her own rise had made her forget the price that had been paid to get there. Taye, still wrestling with guilt, could only watch as his wife's heart grew colder, knowing deep down that their success had come at a terrible cost. After years of being forgotten and left to fend for herself, Amina made her return to Nuena, but this time, she was no longer the frail, elderly woman who had been cast out of her son's home. Amina returned as a completely different person, strong, radiant, and full of life. She had spent the years in the forest not only learning the ways of survival, but also discovering the true power she held. With the help of Nia, Amina had honed her healing abilities and uncovered the hidden fortune she had kept secret for so long. She had used this wealth to build herself a life of comfort and influence, becoming a respected healer in the region. The villagers, who had once ignored her, now looked at her with awe and curiosity. They whispered among themselves about her mysterious past and how she had transformed from a weak, forgotten old woman to one of the most respected figures in the area. When Amina finally stepped back into the village, her presence commanded immediate respect. She wore fine clothing, her hair was styled with a grace that showed her newfound confidence, and her eyes sparkled with the wisdom of someone who had experienced hardship but come out stronger. People who once ignored her now sought her counsel, and they marveled at the wealth she had acquired in her time away. It wasn't just her wealth that made her powerful. It was her knowledge, her healing abilities, and the respect she had earned from her hard work and the secrets she had uncovered. Amina had become an influential figure in her own right, someone people trusted and looked up to. Zena, on the other hand, was left in shock when she first laid eyes on her mother-in-law. The woman she had once cast aside was now standing before her, glowing with power and wealth that Zena could never have imagined. Amina exuded a confidence Zena had never seen in her before. It was as if the woman who had once been frail and helpless had disappeared, replaced by someone with authority, grace, and an air of mystery. Zena was stunned, unsure of how to react. The sight of Amina, who was now a force to be reckoned with, shook her to the core. She couldn't believe this was the same woman she had so callously kicked out of her life. As the villagers whispered about Amina's return, Zena realized that her world was about to change in ways she never expected. As Zena and Taye stood before Amina, still reeling from the shock of her return, Amina finally spoke, her voice calm and steady. She told them the truth that had been hidden for so long. Amina was not just an ordinary woman. She was a hidden heiress to a great fortune, one that was tied to the very founding of Nuena. Long ago, her family had been one of the most influential in the village, but Amina had chosen to leave all of that behind. She had given up her wealth and status, deciding instead to live a simple and humble life. She had wanted nothing more than to live peacefully with her son, Taye, and his family. But when Zena had betrayed her, casting her out into the wilderness, Amina was forced to change everything. With a deep breath, Amina explained that it was her family's fortune, hidden away for generations, that had played a significant role in the village's prosperity. The very land they lived on, the resources they depended on, and even the community's thriving trade had been supported by her wealth. She had left it all behind because she had believed in family, in love, and in the bonds of kinship. But Zena's cruel decision to force her out had left Amina no choice. She could no longer remain in the shadows, pretending to be someone she was not. The time had come to return and reclaim what was rightfully hers. Zena and Taye listened in stunned silence, unable to process the revelation. The woman they had dismissed as weak and powerless was now telling them she had been the key to the village's success. Amina's decision to return was not born out of anger, but necessity. She could no longer allow Zena's betrayal to go unchallenged. With her newfound wealth and influence, Amina was ready to take back what belonged to her and restore balance to her family and the village. As the truth unfolded, Zena's pride and arrogance began to crumble, and she realized just how much she had underestimated the woman she had cast aside. With Amina's return, and the truth of her identity revealed, she wasted no time using her newfound status to expose the depths of Zena's cruelty. Amina approached the village elders, who had once respected Zena, with calm determination. She shared everything: how Zena had manipulated Taye into kicking her out of their home, how she had taken advantage of Amina's frailty and isolation to remove her from the family, all while hiding the truth of Amina's wealth and influence. The elders listened in shock and disbelief, unable to reconcile the kind, respected woman they knew Amina to be with the version Zena had painted. A weak, helpless burden, Taye, who had never known the full extent of Amina's past, stood frozen as the elders turned their judgment toward him. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His guilt, which had haunted him for years, now felt heavier than ever. The villagers who had once looked up to Zena began to murmur, and it wasn't long before words spread throughout the entire community. As the shocking truth came to light, Zena's reputation began to crumble. The woman who had once been admired for her ambition and success was now seen as nothing more than a manipulative, heartless figure. Her cruel treatment of Amina, once hidden in the shadows, was now exposed for all to see. Zena's facade began to crack as the community turned against her. People who had once trusted her now looked at her with suspicion and disdain. The elders called for an urgent meeting, and it was clear that Zena would have to answer for her actions. Taye, caught between his loyalty to his wife and the love he felt for his mother, felt the weight of his own betrayal. He tried to defend Zena, but the truth was undeniable. The damage had been done, and the villagers could not ignore the fact that Zena had cast aside a woman who was not only family, but also a hidden force of power and wealth. The village, once thriving under Zena's influence, now saw her as the villain in a story of manipulation and greed. As the truth about Zena's cruelty and manipulation spread, the entire village turned their backs on her. No longer was she the powerful, influential woman who had once commanded respect. Instead, she became the pariah, the one everyone whispered about and pointed fingers at. The villagers, who had once admired her ambition and drive, now saw her for who she truly was, a woman driven by greed and cruelty, willing to cast aside family for her own gain. Zena's actions were no longer just a secret between her and her husband. They had become public knowledge, and the people she had once considered allies now saw her as a villain. Her social circle shrank, and those who had supported her in the past distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone whose reputation had been so completely tarnished. Taye, crushed by the weight of the truth, was left torn. He had spent years living in denial, believing his mother was the one at fault, but now he was forced to face the painful reality. His guilt over what had happened to Amina consumed him. The love he had once felt for Zena was overshadowed by his deep respect and sorrow for his mother. He had failed her, and the shame weighed heavily on him. The man who had been so proud of his wife's success and influence was now left questioning everything. He tried to support Zena, but deep down, he knew that the damage could never be undone. He felt conflicted, torn between the woman he had loved and the mother he had betrayed. As the community continued to shun Zena, she was left with nothing. Her dreams of power, influence, and success had crumbled before her eyes. The life she had built through manipulation and deceit was now in ruins. Her wealth, once a symbol of her victory, was now a reminder of how she had lost everything. Zena was forced to leave Nwena, the village she had once ruled. She had no choice but to abandon the life she had once known and search for a place where she could rebuild, though she knew it would never be the same. Her fall from grace was swift, and as she walked away from the village, she realized that the price of her ambition and cruelty had been higher than she could ever have imagined. As Zena's downfall became inevitable, Amina rose to her rightful place in Nwena. The village, once blind to her true worth, now saw her as the wise and powerful figure she had always been. Her wealth, which had been hidden away for so long, was no longer a secret. Amina decided to use it not for herself, but for the betterment of the village. She funded projects that improved the lives of the villagers, building schools, expanding the market, and creating a medical clinic that brought healing to those who had once ignored her. Her return brought prosperity, and the people who had once shunned her now sought her guidance, respecting her for the strength, resilience, and wisdom she had shown through everything she had endured. Amina had become the village's true leader, a beacon of hope, and a symbol of what it meant to overcome hardship with grace. While the villagers celebrated Amina's return and honored her as one of their own, Amina found it in her heart to forgive Taye. She understood the weakness that had led him to betray her, knowing that he had been manipulated by his love for Zena. Taye had been deceived, but his heart still held love for his mother, and Amina could see that. She forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because she knew it would heal the wounds between them and allow their relationship to grow once more. However, when it came to Zena, Amina's forgiveness remained absent. She could not find it in her heart to forgive the woman who had shown no remorse, no regret for what she had done. Zena's actions had been driven by a dark ambition that could not be erased. Amina knew that Zena's heart was irreparably stained, and no forgiveness could change that. As the years passed, Amina's influence only grew. She became a symbol of strength and resilience, guiding the village through challenges with wisdom that had been hard-earned over the years. Under her leadership, Ngwena thrived, and the villagers, once divided, now stood united in the spirit of community and respect. Amina's legacy was not just in the wealth she had reclaimed, but in the way she had transformed the hearts of the people. She had shown them that power was not about wealth or manipulation. It was about kindness, forgiveness, and the strength to rise above adversity. Amina's triumph was not only in her return to power, but in the way she had become a true leader, not through fear or force, but through love, wisdom, and the unbreakable spirit that defined her. Zena's fate was now sealed. Living in exile, she was forced to face the harsh reality of her actions. Every day, she was haunted by the truth of what she had done to Amina, her own mother-in-law. The weight of her decisions crushed her, and the guilt weighed heavily on her heart. Zena had once been full of ambition, but now all she had was regret. The screams of remorse echoed in her mind, reminding her of the cruelty she had shown to a woman who had once been her family. The once powerful woman had nothing left but a life of solitude and a heart full of pain. She spent her days in isolation, far away from the people she had once sought to control. The village that had once admired her now saw her as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of pride, greed, and manipulation. Taye, too, lived with the consequences of his actions. Once a proud man, full of hope for the future, he now found himself in solitude, reflecting on the painful choices he had made. He had betrayed the woman who had given him life, and now he was left with nothing but the echoes of his guilt. He could not undo what had been done, and the weight of his guilt followed him everywhere. His love for Zena had clouded his judgment, and now he paid the price. Taye's life was one of quiet reflection, as he spent his days contemplating the mistakes he had made and the price he had paid for betraying his own mother. In contrast, Amina's life became a symbol of resilience and wisdom. She remained a legend in Ngwena, her name spoken with reverence and respect. Amina's strength had led her through years of hardship, and now she was the village's guiding light. She had shown them the power of endurance, the value of kindness, and the importance of humility. Through her teachings, she helped future generations understand the dangers of pride and the consequences of betraying those who love and care for you. Amina's story was passed down through the years, not just as a tale of hardship, but as a lesson in the importance of forgiveness, integrity, and the strength to rise above life's challenges. In the end, Amina's legacy was one of wisdom and grace, a testament to the power of resilience and the wisdom that comes from enduring life's trials.